was home alone on Thanksgiving 2015, evening time, and heard someone knocking. Being in a festive and playful spirit, I opened the door without looking and automatically felt a deep sense of regret, sort of like a literal, oh crap moment. I didn't know where it was coming from until I started actively trying to place what was wrong with the situation. And that's when I realized that they didn't have any whites in their eyes. For a few seconds I thought, isn't Halloween over? And was confused till the oldest boy made eye contact with me, and that's when I literally felt like I was staring death in the face. They wanted to come in, and the way they spoke made it seem like they knew what I was thinking and were actively mocking my helplessness. I slammed the door on them, turned on all my lights, and started watching TV while they stood outside and would occasionally knock. I feel like I lost a good 6 hours of time because I don't even remember when I fell asleep or what I was last watching. I remember when I first sat down, Gabriel Iglesias was playing, but I don't remember anything else. When I woke up, it was 2 a.m. and the lights were all off and static was on the television. I have Dish Network and there were no power outages in my area, and I don't get static if Dish were to go out. I'd get a channel listed as HDMI and a black screen, or it would be the introduction screen where it would show two people talking about the features of Dish Network. Also, if the lights went out, they would come back on. I had to literally switch the lights on and off a few times for it to work. No one was home. After that, I would occasionally see them outside, and every time it would be pin drop silence and my lights would occasionally go out or something would lose power like my dish, and one time my phone that was at 63% dropped to 1% in 5 minutes. After a few months of being afraid of every knock, I decided to call an imam, a man who leads prayer in a mosque, to bless the house. I also saged the house and bought a lot of different surahs or psalms to put in every room, including the bathrooms. Since then, the visits have stopped. However, a few months after that, I remember hearing a blood-curdling scream and a banging on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw nothing. A few months ago, maybe 2 or so, my mom and I heard a banging coming from the front door, and same thing, no one was there. I don't know if it was them, or something coming back, or just kids playing a prank. But needless to say, I'm terrified. The town I went to high school in is a large suburban area located only an hour's drive down the freeway from the large Californian cities like San Diego and LA. Not a small town, but also not a metropolitan city, just a lot of neighborhoods and shopping centers. I had been driving for a year or two. I may have even been a senior at the time. On my way home one day, I stopped at a CVS. It was just after school, so it was still sunny. In fact, it was so sunny out that I raised my hand to shield my eyes as I walked to my car. There were spaces directly in front of the store, and I took one of the first ones. Now remember, I am a small female and grew up wary of being kidnapped, so when I was approached in the parking lot by a young man on a skateboard, I was suspicious. I was a nerdy punk and didn't know anyone who skateboarded and didn't know this guy from school or anything. So I thought it was weird that he would even be talking to me at all, especially in a CVS parking lot. So I come out, and the skateboard kid is just standing by the hood of my car. I drove a beat-up Honda Accord with my first car driving dents and all, so it was super weird when this kid complimented my car. I will never forget. He said, "Nice car," like he actually meant it. So, a little flattered, I looked up and into his face to thank him. I will never know if it was just a sunny shadow or if he was a demon, but his eyes, his sockets, the whites of his eyes, it was all indescribably black, shadowed, but also just black. Black pupils, blacker whites, black sockets. It freaked me out, looking into his eyes, and I couldn't look away. I could see all of him, but all I could look at was his black eyes. I managed to thank you and became flustered as I went to open my car, but he stayed at the hood and offered to wash it for me. He literally said, "I could wash it for you." Like, what? Why? No. I don't think so. I got in the car anyway and rejected his offers to wash my car. He was starting to creep me out, and he stayed near the hood of my car until I backed out of the space and left the lot. His creepy eyes, his creepy offer. I will just never forget it. I maybe hoped that he had dressed his eyes in eyeliner and black contacts, but I will never know. I only know what I saw, and I saw the kid with the black eyes. I have always been fascinated with the darkness. Nightmares, horror movies, ghosts, tarot. I have always found a beauty in that sort of thing. My father, mother, sister Willow, who was 1 or 2 years old at the time, and I moved into a family farmhouse when I started high school. My great-grandparents raised their children and grandchildren there, including my father, so I understood why my father was so eager to move into the property once it was available. It was being rented out for a few years. The farmhouse is now about 120 years old with 27 acres of trees and green grass in western Pennsylvania. The house looks its age on the inside. Tilted floors, poorly lit rooms, and a damp basement and canning cellar. Both of my great-grandparents have passed away in the home. From our records, every owning tenant since the 1800s has died in the home or on the property. One of the worst deaths was a homeowner falling into the lye mixture, which is what they use to make soap for laundry, and they died. I am not a historian, but I have been told that yes, it was possible to die from this. There has also been miscarriages and stillborns in the house. What house doesn't have the history, though? Our first week, I didn't like being inside the house. I am a sensitive, and even at 13, before I realized all the death and history this house had, I felt uneasy. The first time I got off the bus at this new house, my family was not there. They were finishing packing our old house, so I felt compelled to lay on the upstairs landing beside the creepy crawl space and take a nap. The following weekend, my feelings were confirmed. I was watching my baby sister for the night. She could crawl and talk a bit, but nothing I had to worry about losing her in our own home. That was until I lost her. I didn't hear her crawl away, so around the house I went only to find her on the stairs to the basement. This is alarming for a few reasons. 1, the basement door was closed. How did a 1-year-old open it? 2, the old steps are gappy and the floor below concrete, so one slip and she would have been hurt. My heart was pounding. 3, the lights were off and she was sitting on the most middle step, looking off into the darkness, talking to someone. I let her talk for a few moments before I got her attention. I was weirded out, but felt curious to see what she was talking about. When I couldn't make sense of it, I called for her to come up. She turned around and started crawling back up the steps to me. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. She stopped and turned back to the darkness and said calmly, "No, that's my sissy." I didn't move, just kept encouraging her to come to me. She stopped once more and turned into the darkness annoyed and said in a very firm voice, "No, that's my sissy." At this point, I grabbed her, shut the door, ran to the safety of the TV light in the living room and called my parents. From that point on, I personally started experiencing things I believe changed me, made me more sensitive to the point where seeing and communicating with spirits is a common part of my day now. Living in a home with so much history, so many souls opened me up, but not without making me feel crazy. So yesterday morning, my neighbor passed away while sitting down in his backyard. The police, paramedics, and coroner came and took him away. I went a couple of minutes later to say my condolences to his family and told them we'd be here if they needed anything. So that night, I was about to head over to my girlfriend's house when I turned to look at my neighbor's house and noticed that the street light was hitting their yard and illuminating it, but there were around 10 shadows on the ground, kind of like the kind people make when light hits them from behind. There was no one outside and everything was quiet. It just freaked me out a bit. I ended up going to my girlfriend's house, and when I came back, the yard looked normal and the shadows were gone. I just wanted to share this with you guys. Now, I'm not saying it was paranormal or anything, but the timing of it was weird. It's been an unsettling day. The dog, as usual, had me up at dawn for her morning constitutional. As we stepped outside, I saw police cars parked in front of the house next door, 3 of them. It was a very unusual sight in my quiet little neighborhood, so I was naturally curious. I thought at first that it might be a domestic issue, though that didn't really make sense. The folks next door are very sweet, and there was no history of discourse. The police cars remained for some time, hours in fact. Now and then I would peek through the kitchen window to see if there was any other motion. Sometimes before noon, a black van rolled up, and shortly after that, I saw them removing a body from the house. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to intrude, so I haven't gone over. I'm friendly with the neighbors, but not close friends, so I thought it best to let things play out and figured that they would let me know when they're ready. I wasn't sure who passed away. There are just 3 in their family, Janie, Bill, and their son Devin. Bill is a big guy, so I knew it wasn't him, simply based on the shape of the body bag. None of them, to my knowledge, were ill. The idea that the police were there for so long and that a coroner removed the body told me that it wasn't an expected death. There was no crime scene unit, nothing was taped off. It's been quiet there ever since. Their car has been gone since this afternoon and the house is dark. A couple of hours ago I took the dog for her evening walk. It was around 11 p.m. We go around the block. As we're approaching the house on our return, I saw Devin standing in the driveway. I felt a chill because I didn't know what to say to him. I didn't know if I should say anything at all. I still had no idea what transpired this morning, but seeing him, my best assumption became that it was his mother who had passed. What do you say to a kid in that case? But how could I not say something? So I got closer and I said, "Hi, Devin. You doing all right?" He had been looking out to the lake across the street. At the sound of my voice, he turned to me. He smiled, and then he was gone. Just gone. He didn't walk off. He didn't fade away. He was just gone. Their car still isn't there and the house is still dark. I don't know what I just saw or what happened. I've never seen someone disappear like this before, and it has me unnerved. I've been trying to occupy my mind by surfing the net for explanations, and I find myself here wondering if anyone else has ever experienced something like this. I'll take any answers I can get. Update. I didn't sleep at all last night, but for maybe an hour or so. My experience seeing Devin vanish the way he did in the driveway would not be the last encounter I would have. I was pacing much of the night or settled uneasily in my chair in the office. My wife is an early bird and was already in bed before any of this began, and I didn't wake her. She was upset, as was I, without knowing that something horrible happened next door. When she got up this morning, the first thing she asked was if I had heard anything about the neighbors. I chose not to tell her about my experiences, for now anyway. I wrote about seeing the boy in the driveway, but there would be more. Our garden is separated from the house, connected by a pergola. There's a table and chairs under the pergola, and I parked my car just beyond them. I was looking out the front door almost constantly last night. Sometime around 3 a.m., I saw a figure walk through the patio and up to my car. It was distinct but not detailed. It was dark out there, so it wouldn't be detailed in any case. It was about the size and shape of Devin, and I think I would have assumed it to be him, even if I hadn't had the strange experience earlier. The figure sort of sat next to my car, on the ground, right at the driver's door. It was there for a moment or two, and then it was gone. I could easily be convinced that my mind made this up. I'm not sure if I believe what I saw. The lights up front are on a motion sensor, and they didn't trip. I can only turn on and off the power from inside, but the lights won't go on until they're triggered. They're very sensitive, so if there was anything out there, they should have gone on. This morning around 9 a.m., my wife saw a familiar blue Audi pull into the driveway next door, and we knew it to be Chip, who is Devin's uncle. She asked me to go and speak with him. I know Chip reasonably well. He and I helped Bill take a section of their fence down when they had a shed placed in their backyard. He's a very nice guy. I went out, and though a little nervous, called out to him. I asked him if everything was okay, and said that I knew something had happened. Chip, who until now I never saw without a smile, shook his head and looked to the ground as he made his way across the lawn. He told me he was there to pick up some things for his brother and his wife who would be staying with them for a while. Then he told me that Devin had died. The confirmation hit me like a fist, and I let out a guttural sigh as I did my best to hold my tears. I told him how sorry I was and asked what I could do to help. He said there was nothing anyone could do, and his body language made it clear he didn't want to talk, that he just wanted to go and take care of what he needed to do. I asked them what happened, and they told me they weren't sure yet, but that it's very likely an aneurysm. Devin had a Beguine tumor removed from behind his eye about 2 years ago. It was a scary time, but the surgery was thought to be completely successful. He had been in seemingly perfect health. I immediately assumed that an aneurysm would be related to his surgery. We've known Janie and Bill for about 10 years, ever since they moved in. They're very sweet people. We knew them to chat over lawnmowers or to hang out with us at block parties. We'd had them over, and we've been over to their place a couple of times, but that was the extent. The catalyst of our friendship was really Devin. He was the ambassador of the neighborhood. We watched him grow up from a little guy, and as he got older, he was always looking for odd jobs to feed his skateboard hobby, and I always kept him employed. Wow, I'm sitting here crying my eyes out as I type. I don't just say this because he's gone, but I really loved him. He was a good kid. I had to tell my wife, who immediately broke down. After a while, she was determined to talk to Janie, but we were hesitant. We've got their cell numbers. She sent her a text, thinking it was the least intrusive method, and told her we were here for them, for whatever they needed. Could it be that I really saw him last night? Why me? And more importantly, why was he there? Is he still there? I've read enough to know some theories about crossing over, and for the first time in my life, I'm giving the idea some credit. Could it be he hasn't crossed over? Does he need help? I can't do this to his parents. I can't tell them that I'm seeing their son. I won't do that. I just don't know what to do. Will they see him too? I have more questions than answers. I'm upset, heartbroken in fact, and I don't think I'm thinking clearly. About 5 years ago, I was living in a compact 2-story unit with my mother and her boyfriend. I was a teenager at the time. As per the norm for such houses, the bedrooms were upstairs, 2 of them, and the only bathroom in the house as well. We didn't have a lot of money, so my bed was a mattress on the floor in a pretty much empty room that had one small window. The night before this event, I felt something poking me through the blanket in the early hours of the morning, but summed it up to pins and needles from sleeping in a funny position on my old mattress. I was awoken up about once a week by what sounded like very light scratching on the glass window, like claws or nails. But being a cynical kid, I always told myself it's one of the neighbor's cats on our balcony, then waited for it to stop before drifting back to sleep again. Though thinking back on it now, it almost sounded like it was the inside of the window. Note, I've never saw a cat on my windowsill. One night, however, after the scratching ceased, I couldn't get back to sleep, so I stared at the ceiling and listened to the rain for what seemed like nearly an hour before I heard something. It sounded like the wind lightly tapping my wide-open bedroom door against the wall. I had to pee, and seeing as I couldn't get back to sleep, I got up and went to go to the toilet, but I heard the door knock again slightly. But I could see, lit only by moonlight, that there was a good few inches between the door and the wall, and that the door didn't move at all, let alone enough to make a noise that loud, even though it was still fairly quiet. I don't know why I did, but I tapped the door lightly with my knuckle twice. I then heard the same knock repeated back to me a few seconds later. Knowing I couldn't possibly get back to sleep afterwards without properly investigating, I checked behind the door, the other side of the wall, and then half closed the door and sat down in front of it. I gave it a knock, 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 and sure enough, 10 seconds later I got the same knock repeating back to me from the top of the door, it seemed, only a little lighter than my own knocks, like they were tapping with their fingernails or something. I do this with different simple knocks a couple more times before I decide to take it one step further and ask it something. I said in a voice only a little louder than a whisper, "Are you a ghost? Knock once if you are." I got no response. I tried knocking again, no response. This creeped me out a fair amount. At this point, I really needed to pee. I already needed to pee, but my nerves creeping up on me made it worse. I didn't want to turn any lights on, as my mother and her boyfriend were asleep in their room very close with the doors open, and because it's so compact, the toilet light would hit them in their bed. The bathroom door is directly parallel to my mom and boyfriend's room, with my door being adjacent to both. Imagine a meter square on the floor, and the 4 sides of the door and stairs, Mom's room is opposite the bathroom and my room is opposite the stairs. On my way out the bathroom, I'm forced to look into my mom's bedroom, and that's when I see it. It looked like a shadow, or a man in full black in the dark. It wasn't my mom or her boyfriend because I could hear them both snoring in unison and could see their feet on the bed behind it. I froze, stared at it. It stepped forwards just outside my mom's room onto that small square of floor and seemed to stand up as if though it had been crouching. It was dark and the only light coming in was still the moonlight from the bedroom window, but I could tell it was there. I could barely see, but I could still tell where it stopped and the roof started. It must have been 7 feet tall. I could remember that all I could think was, is this real? Is this just somehow my own shadow? Is it my mom's boyfriend? That's when I realized I could still see their feet and hear them snoring, and that the light wasn't coming from behind me, but from the right. I was still frozen, locked in my own thought until it breathed. It felt and sounded like a bull or a horse letting out a big sigh. At that exact moment that I realized that the noise I heard and breeze I felt was a breath, I did something I honest to God still can't believe I did. I ran towards it, to get to my sleeping mother. Not only was she the only safety I could think of, this thing came out of her room. I was worried for her as well. I closed my eyes, but I hit it with my left arm as I ran past. It felt like cold water. It was cold but not hard. It felt almost like a pocket of really dense gas. The moment I actually felt it touch my skin still feels like it lasted for minutes, not the split second I know it must have been. I made it to my mom and woke her up in tears, but I didn't want her to worry, so I told her I had a nightmare. I didn't sleep that night, and we moved out a month later. I told my mother what really happened about 3 months later, and we had a discussion that still haunts both of us whenever something creepy happens. It turns out my mother had been seeing a dark figure of sorts standing in the corner of her room. She also heard the scratching on her window, and lights would literally turn themselves on or off at the switch. Not flicker. The light switch would just flick itself and the light would turn off. My friends never believed this story and they still think I made it all up. I myself was never a believer of things science couldn't explain, and still sum up most strange things that happened to me as my brain misinterpreting information. But after this occurrence, as well as 3 much briefer and less terrifying incidences, I'm not sure about what I think I know to be fact or fiction. I work third shift at a small convenience store. A couple of weeks ago, around 3 a.m., I was by myself and heard a voice call out, "Hello?" I looked around, and no one was there. Later, I heard the same voice again, this time from right over my shoulder behind me. "Hello?" It was Monday morning and I thought my delivery truck was there and the door chime didn't go off as it sometimes doesn't do, but again, there was no one there. The other night again, no one there except me. The office door was closed and locked, but the light inside was on. Here's the thing. It's a motion-activated light that is on a timer. I was the last one in there, over 4 hours prior, and I made sure the door was closed and locked. There is no fan, window, or any air source that could have disrupted something to set off the motion sensor. I work by myself, but I feel like I'm not alone. The house I grew up in was weird. There would be weird leaks from the ceiling where there were no pipes, and miraculously would dry up quickly. Electric and plumbing issues that were odd, etc., etc. We moved away from that house in the summer of 2014, and I haven't felt the burden, I guess you would call it, of other energy since. I moved out of my mom's house last year, but moved back in recently. She lives in a fairly new house, only one previous owner before. This started maybe 2 weeks ago. We live basically in the middle of the woods, and I was walking my dog in the yard. He likes to go to the bathroom in the woods, and the sun is just coming up, and I hear my boyfriend's voice saying my name, which is odd because he was inside sleeping last I checked, and he wasn't calling out through the window because the window to our bedroom wasn't open. I brushed it off and assumed I was hearing things. The next morning I was walking my dog around the same time and heard rustling in the woods, followed by this time my sister's voice saying my name. My sister lives 1,100 miles away in Orlando. The other day, things got super weird. Our dog wouldn't eat all day, nor would he drink any water. He normally likes to look out the window, but that day he didn't leave the window area. He was staring out it all day. Now this window was on the second floor, pretty high up. By nightfall, my dog is still staring out that window. It had to be about 10 p.m. All the lights in the room were off, no sounds coming from the room. The window was shut, and I decided to look out the window to see what my dog had been looking at all day. I saw a coyote trot across my front yard. Then it just stops dead in its tracks and stares at us in our second-story window. My heart dropped. It stared for like 3 solid seconds and then continued on its way. Tonight I was walking home from work. It got dark around 6:30 and I was walking down my road, which is dark and empty and basically a wooded area. I heard an unfamiliar voice this time, and it said, "I know it's you." I can't tell you how fast I power walked home. And seriously, can someone tell me what's going on? I grew up in a haunted house, and I don't know if something has been following me. So a few years back, a friend started renting an old house not far from my own, and it definitely had a creepy vibe to it. Apparently the couple who lived there had died in the house. Excellent, I thought. So I helped her move in and started unpacking kitchen things, and she was going to pick up some things from the previous house. Alone in the house, I started getting the feeling of being watched and that I shouldn't be there. I stood still in the kitchen for a moment looking around, hair on end, when the kitchen door slammed shut. No way. I go outside and have a smoke and wait for my friend. Didn't want to freak her out. It was the only place she could find, so I didn't mention anything. Weeks go by and she tells me about weird noises in the house, and she's afraid in her bedroom. She asked me to stay over one night, and I'm super reluctant, but being a good friend, I agreed. That night I stayed over was the last for me. We went to bed maybe about 2 a.m.-ish, and I slept in the bed with her. We were just closing our eyes when we hear the back door in the kitchen rattle. Then clear as day, heavy footsteps made their way slowly from the kitchen to the front bedroom we were in. It walked in the bedroom, and the noise stopped at the end of the bed, and this oppressive, terrible feeling filled the room, like the air was thick and someone was definitely looking at us. We couldn't see anyone and just looked at each other till it was over. It lasted almost 15 minutes. Super uncomfortable and very much not wanted there. She slept in the lounge room from then on, but things aren't any less tense. For 4 years, I traveled for work with my best friend. Both he and I are sensitives. I had an experience in a truck stop in the western United States that I have only talked about to my boss and best friend. It bothered me so much that this is the first time I have shared it in 3 years. Before that, I only told my friend. I waited until we were a whole state away to tell him. I will mention that spirits like to corner me in bathrooms. It is becoming a theme. It is becoming so common that I have forbidden the dead to bother me in my own bathroom. If I have to go into a public restroom, I make a telepathic announcement for the dead to leave me alone while I use the facilities. We were stopped at a large truck stop. I like this place. It was clean. It had 3 restaurants, a movie theater that was free, and 2 stores to wander through if you needed to stay a couple of days and had to get out of the sleeper for a while. Someone had painted the hallways with Native American symbols. There were kachinas and kokopelli, animals, and western scenes. We arrived and went into our separate restrooms to wash up before breakfast, and I went into a stall. I sat down and saw a shadow moving outside of the stalls. The closest person was a woman with a small child at the far end of the restroom. She was changing a diaper. Other than the 3 of us, it was quiet. A 4-foot-tall figure appeared inside the stall door, and I was stunned. It was completely black. It was 2-dimensional, but stood away from the door. It was so dark that there were no discernible features. It had spiky hair. The closest thing I can describe it is like a Kokapelli or Ichigo Kurosaki or Baby Goku in outline. Thick spikes, distinct. It stood there. I knew it had once been human. I knew it had been around for centuries. I knew it knew that I could see it. I was trying not to feel frightened, but it was almost touching my knees. It emanated anger, hostility, and a sense that it had at one time been a very small Native American man. But it was old, trapped, dark, twisted, and negative. I told it to get away from me, and it moved through the door to stand immediately outside the stall. I told it to get back and exited the stall to go wash my hands, and it stood there. Never before had I seen anything so black. Outside of the stall, it turned into a three-dimensional shadow. I got out of there. I tried to bar the door by imagining it was trapped inside a box of white light. I tried to throw white light around the lady and the baby from outside at the door. My friend and I went to the restaurant. He asked me what was up, and I told him I wouldn't talk about it until we were on the road. He said he understood. I wondered if the paintings of native symbols had trapped it in the bathrooms. I wonder if the running water had attracted it for the energy. I wondered why a male spirit was hanging out in a woman's loo. Later, I told my friend what I had seen. I told him 100 miles down the road. He told me that one of the restaurants there had a set of restrooms. It was on the far side of the building. We decided to throw up white light barriers every time we were in that specific hallway from then on. We've been there since after that, and we could sense it, but we wouldn't talk about it when we were there. Hey guys, thanks for listening. If you'd like to have access to these narrations 24 hours before they release on YouTube, please consider supporting on Patreon for only $1 or more a month. Also be sure to check out the merch store at shop.spreadshirt.com/letsread to get some cool t-shirts and other apparel. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon.